Well, hello there, church. I hope that you are all doing well and making it through these still pretty difficult days. I had an opportunity to see several of you in the last week, and it was just great getting to see you change, because I wasn't able to hug you or anything like that. But still, the thoughts are there. Just being able to be together, and hopefully it won't be too long before we are. I think things are starting to return to normal. I know we're ready for a change from life as we know it right now. We are waiting for life to return back to normal, and in a lot of ways, and for many, things are starting to get back there. A lot of us, we've been itching to get things back to normal, but a lot of us, we're also still looking at a return to normal with a bit of concern over the risks involved. There's worries about getting infected with this virus and passing it on to people, and it's a concern. But in this whole situation, to say that we've been inconvenienced these last couple months because of the virus, it would be an understatement. Our lives were turned upside down in a way that very few of us ever thought that they would. I saw this meme about a week ago that pointed out that 5 years ago, anyone who answered the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, they got it wrong. None of us saw this coming. Few of us thought that this was possible, especially here. And I think what's been incredibly hard for everyone is that we are so used to getting what we want when we want. And we talked about that last week. But we live in a culture, a world, a nation even, that has prided itself on being able to get what we want when we wanted. And that was taken away. And we call it a loss of freedom. So, that may be the case. But I think it could be said that we lost our convenient life. And that may be what upset us more than anything. Stores, restaurants, and businesses that were a big part of how we did life, they were suddenly closed, and much of life was shut down. And those businesses that we could actually go to were all of a sudden, we found ourselves having to live with a new set of rules or expectations. We saw businesses and individuals wearing masks, and were encouraged to wear them ourselves. Shopping carts were being disinfected by employees of stores. Whoever thought about something like that happen? We were told to keep our distance from each other, 6 feet, and there were guidelines on even which direction to go in an aisle in a grocery store. And some may say that this was an overreaction, and I'm not going to get into that. But the reason for all of this was to help protect ourselves from each other and protect each other from ourselves. And I remember the first couple trips to the grocery store after this one went down, I remember feeling very uneasy, sad, and even a bit fearful. I kept saying to myself, I can't believe this is happening. And from the looks of other people I saw in these stores, the thinned out crowds and the thinned out shelves, I wasn't alone. In many ways, life is and will be returning back to the way it was, but I believe that it's going to look a bit differently, at least for a while. Some of the changes that we have seen lately may continue for a long time. And some of these changes will make life just a little harder and less convenient. But, we'll adjust, we'll adapt. We always do. Life has changed dramatically, but we live in a constantly changing world that we have to constantly adapt to. Today, most of us pretty much do everything with our cell phones. I use it as my GPS. I don't use maps anymore. I still remember how to use them, but I don't have to use them. I use my phone to shop and to pay bills, and I use it to research stuff. And I use it as my primary camera. I use it as a flashlight. It's become an integral part of my life, and probably most of us can say that. It's hard to imagine life without smartphones, but 15 years ago, those things didn't really even exist. The first iPhone came out in June of 2007, and that was pretty much where it all began. In these last 15 years, cell phones have changed the way we do life. It has helped in many ways, but it's also helped us become detached from the world around us, which is probably a topic for another time. But 25 years ago, Amazon and eBay were introduced to us, and with it, online shopping began, changing the way we do life. Google didn't even exist 25 years ago. Sure, we had a couple other options like Ask Jeeves and Excite and Yahoo, but even at that, those didn't exist much before 1995. Before that, we had to work to find information. We used maps. We got our news from watching TV or reading the newspaper. We had to go to a physical store to find new music. and we had to open physical books like the encyclopedia and the dictionary to find information. Photos, they weren't digital. They were all kept in photo albums, and you never knew what a photo was going to look like until you got that picture developed, which could take days or even a week. Life has changed dramatically in a very short time. In some ways, it made life better, but in some ways, it made life harder. Every time change happens, we can find good and bad. We find new challenges and new opportunities. Change is a constant, and changes are happening more and more rapidly for us as a culture. As individuals, we see life changing constantly all the time as well. We grow up and we see our world constantly changing. Our families change, sometimes for the good and sometimes not so much. We have new people come into our lives and we have people leave them. Sometimes those changes are good and sometimes they can be devastating. We see changes in our jobs and careers happening, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad. And I can go on and on about changes that take place in each of our lives that are constant. And while many of these changes can be good, they can also be bad for us. And the truth is, we don't really know which will work or not work before we see that change happening. Change can be exciting for us, but it can also make us very uneasy because there is a lot of uncertainty. Sometimes we find ourselves longing for a time where things were simpler. Even though most of the technological advancements that have been made in the last 10 to 20 and even 100 years were supposed to make our lives simpler. We keep on wanting life to be simple like it was back in the old days. And I think that what we really look for is a day that we didn't have to guess about what was coming around the corner. We look back in our lives with a bit of clarity that we don't have now. The thing is that life was really not as clear as we thought it was. It was just as uncertain then as it is now, only now you can look back at several years ago having known what the next year would bring. Life changes rapidly, and it's almost like getting stuck on a merry-go-round that feels like it's getting faster and faster, and we just get dizzy. We want life to settle down. Many of us today want the world to return to normal because of what we have been going through the last couple months, where life has been turned on its head. But I think that's not a new thing to want that return to normal. Changes happen in our lives that shake us and make us uneasy. It's like trying to walk on jello. And one day you have a solid footing, and the next one you lose your balance and you sink. It doesn't take a pandemic to change or shake up our world. It happens to all of us from time to time. We long for certainty. We want to stand and walk on solid ground. And we get frustrated with life changing so much because so much of the time it results in the loss of some kind. And we are tired, so tired of losing things and people that we care about. We want solid ground, but we find ourselves trying to walk in mud. And there are times when we think about God and our situation, and we can get frustrated because, He was supposed to give us solid ground, right? And if He's supposed to give us solid ground to stand on, then why am I stuck in the mud? And you can get like Job did, who wasn't really all that patient if you look at the story. In Job 30, 18 and 19, he says this, "With a strong hand, God grabs my shirt. He grips me by the collar of my coat. He has thrown me into the mud. I'm nothing more than dust and ashes." That's a pretty harsh thing to say about God, but I think there may be times where we feel like that, or at least confused about why life is so uncertain, and we try to find some explanation or someone to blame, and we can get angry and depressed because of how hard it can get to just walk through this world. Sometimes we blame God. Sometimes we blame Satan. Sometimes we blame people we don't like. Sometimes we blame people who used to love that hurt us. And sometimes we blame ourselves. And we get fixated on trying to figure out where things went wrong. And we long for a day or a moment where things get better. And we long to be back in the day or the moment before things went wrong. And the hard truth is, it's been like this since the fall in the garden. This world wasn't supposed to be so crazy, but it became that way when sin first entered the picture. Life fell apart when God's people took their eyes off of Him. And since that moment, it's never been easy. In fact, it's been downright hard. We find ourselves sometimes thinking like the psalmist did in Psalms 55, 4 and 5. It says, "My heart pounds in my chest. The terror of death assaults me. Fear and trembling overwhelm me, and I can't stop shaking." And look in Psalm 69, 1 and 2. The psalmist is pleading, "Save me, O God, for the flood waters are up to my neck. Deeper and deeper I seek into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I am in deep water, and the floods overwhelm me." The whole thing, this thing we call life, it can just get exhausting and cause us to despair. And when we do, just know that you aren't alone. First, know that it's okay to be frustrated with life. It's even okay to get angry sometimes and even question God, but know that God will have an answer for you that will probably put you back in your place. Job had faith in God, but couldn't understand why bad things were happening to him. He knew that God had the power to control everything, which just made it frustrating because Job couldn't see why God would cause or allow these bad things to happen to him. So Job vented, and God let him vent for a while, then came back, and then God came back with what you see in Job 38. Throughout the chapter there, you see God telling Job things like, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you know so much. Who kept the sea inside its boundaries as it burst from the womb, as I clothed it with clouds and wrapped it in thick darkness? Have you ever commanded the morning to appear and caused the dawn to rise in the east?" God patiently listened. He listened to Job, and then he reminded Job of God's sovereign power. It may seem like life was out of control, but God was still in control, and he wanted Job to know that. He wanted Job to trust that and have hope that God would make everything all right again. Now, God did make everything all right in Job's life, and Job was left with these thoughts in Job 42, 5 and 6. He said, "I had only heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. I take back everything I said. I sit in dust and ashes, and I show my repentance." Job had a little bit of a knowledge about God before his life fell apart, and probably had a bit of a relationship, but that relationship was tested and made stronger, just like his knowledge of God was made stronger when it was over. When God pulled Job through all of it, out of the mud, Job had a better understanding of God and a better understanding and a better relationship with him, and that's what God is longing for. He wants us to know him more and to see the love he has for us. And there's no better way to see that than when he allows us to walk in mud. As miserable as it can be, we feel like we are sinking, and just when it seems like we are at the end, he pulls us up. He lifts us up. We see what David saw in Psalm 40, 1 and 2. David said, "I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and he turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground, and he steadied me as I walked along." The hard thing is that God may let our struggles go on for a lot longer than what we want or are comfortable with. You'll get through it though. And the longer you have to wait, the sweeter it's going to be. I know that's easier to say than experience, but Jesus made a promise that one day he would wipe away every tear from our eye, and that all the good, all the bad and hard things in life would one day be gone. Until that day, keep looking to God. Like I said, life fell apart when we took our eyes off God. The only thing that will really help us now is putting our eyes back on God, learning to trust in him, learning to put our hope in him and him alone. All the things and even the people we have in our lives are only here for a moment. We want to be able to trust that they will be here tomorrow, but we know this just isn't the case. The only one we can count on being there through all of it is God. And he wants us to keep our eyes on him and trust that he will steady things out for us. He will steady us when we think we're going to fall. And even if we do fall, he will be there to catch us and lift us back up again. The changes that are coming to the way we do life, they may be hard, But don't let it get to you. Trust in God, and He will help you navigate all of it. He will give you what you need to get by. May we all live with that hope, and may we all pass that hope on to others.